Okay, so today we are going to be talking about rhetorical elements, right, or rhetoric. What is rhetoric? Our driving question for our class is, how does rhetoric help communities move towards social justice, right? So to even begin to answer that question, we have to know the definition of rhetoric. So one definition of rhetoric is the sort of impressive but insincere use of language. So say, for example, a politician. Maybe you'll hear a politician answering some questions, and at first when you're listening it sounds really good, it sounds really impressive, like he knows what he's talking about. But when you really listen to what he or she is saying, you start to realize, wait, they're not answering the question, or they're not really saying anything, and that might be called rhetoric. Another definition of rhetoric is the art of effective speaking or writing. Yet another definition is the art of persuasion. Your book defines rhetoric, the glossary of your book defines rhetoric as the art, practice, and theory of ethical communication. I really like that definition, the practice of ethical communication. Now, to begin to understand this, right, we need to know the main components of communication. So the main components of rhetorical or rhetoric of communication is a speaker, a message, and an audience, right? If you're the speaker, you need to know as much as you can about your audience. If you're the audience, you need to know as much as you can about the person speaking to you. And either way, you should know how to best get your message across, or how to best analyze the message that the speaker is trying to get across to you. And so to do that, you need to know about the rhetorical elements of that message. Now, in terms of our driving question, I think the best definition to use is the one in your glossary. So sort of consider when you're asking yourself that question, if you want to break it down or say it a little bit differently, you might say, can the practice of ethical communication achieve social justice? All right, so now our first essay, the question is basically something like, how does discussion achieve social justice? And so to answer this question of how does discussion achieve social justice, it's helpful to be able to talk about rhetorical elements. So the main rhetorical elements that I want to talk about right now, I hope you're taking notes on, are tone, purpose, audience, the writer's perspective, ethos, pathos, and logos. Now your textbook, the reading you've done, already talked about things like genre, stance, I can't remember all of the key terms in there. I think they also talked about tone already, and maybe style, and those are all really important. I'm going to go into a little bit more depth, not a lot, a little bit more depth on some of these elements that I just said. So tone. When you're writing, you need to know the emotions that are coming through your words. So are you angry? Is that coming out in your writing? Are you passionate? Are you sincere? Are you calm? Are you being sarcastic? Which is not good in academic writing, by the way, but sometimes maybe you feel the need to be sarcastic. You need to know, is that coming through in my words? When someone's just reading this, they're not hearing my voice. Are they able to pick up the tone, the emotion? Purpose. Purpose is another really important rhetorical element to start out with. You need to know when you're writing, are you writing to inform someone, to persuade someone? Let's say, for example, you're writing about the civil rights reading that we just did. So are you writing to just inform someone about what the civil rights movement was all about? Or are you writing to convince them that certain things caused the civil rights? Or are you maybe comparing the Occupy Wall Street movement to the civil rights movement? Or you're arguing that the civil rights movement was better run than the Occupy Wall Street movement, right? Any of these purposes, they're all very different, even though they're all kind of about the same topic. You need to know what your purpose is. When you're reading someone else's text, you need to know what their purpose is. And a lot of times they're not just going to come right out and say it, so you need to sort of look for it in the reading. You also need to know your audience. You need to know your audience's values. You need to know what they know and what they don't know. You need to know their beliefs. You need to know even things like their age, their gender, their ethnicity. All of these things are going to help you better communicate with them, whether you're just trying to inform them, or especially if you're trying to persuade them. So for example, if you're trying to inform someone about, maybe you're comparing the civil rights movement with Occupy Wall Street. If your audience doesn't know what Occupy Wall Street is, everything you say is lost on them. So you need to know whether or not they're going to know about that, so you know whether or not to include it in your writing. Writer's perspective. So when it's your paper, you're the one with the perspective. So if it's your paper, it's really good to be aware of your biases, as well as other things, about yourself, about your perspective. But bias or your prejudices are the biggest ones, because those might come through your writing, and it really might turn some people off. So you need to sort of check that. It's even more valuable to you, or more useful to you, to understand when you're the audience what the person who wrote the text that you're reading, what their perspective was. What was their age, their gender, their ethnicity, what's their political affiliation, or what are their biases, or what are they trying to get you to do or to buy or to believe. Those are really important things when you're analyzing a text. Finally, ethos, pathos, and logos. These are three really important, really necessary to know rhetorical elements. Ethos sounds a lot like ethics, right? Ethos is the author's credibility, their trustworthiness. You make ethical appeals when you're persuading, right? You appeal to someone's sense of ethics. You appeal to their values. Another appeal is pathos. Pathos, like pathology, I guess. Pathos is emotion. So you appeal to people's emotions. And finally, logos is logic. It's when you appeal to someone's logic, to their reason, or their sense of reason. So consider if you are trying to convince your roommate that you need a cat, that you two need to adopt a cat. So if you're appealing to their sense of ethos, to their sense of ethics, you might try to convince them that there are so many shelter cats, and it would be the right thing to do for your state or for your town or for your community. If you adopted a cat, it would be the ethical thing to do. Or you might talk to them about other people who have adopted a cat, and you might say, well, these people know what they're talking about. They're credible, they're trustworthy, because they've adopted a cat, and they say it's really great for whatever the reasons are. Pathos, you might, click on the Sarah McLachlan commercial, right, with all those animals in the shelter all sad and needing a home, and you might try to make your roommate really sad, and see, we have to adopt this cat, we have to take it in, it's the right thing to do, and appeal to their sense of sadness or empathy, right? Finally, logos, logic. This is the best thing to use in any academic writing. You want to use this the most. Appealing to their sense of reason. So maybe you have a rat problem, and you say, well, if we get a cat, the cat will scare away the rats, or will hunt the rats, or whatever, and then we won't have the rat problem, right? So you might be making a logical argument. So those are the three sort of ethical appeals, or rhetorical appeals that you need to know about. So all of these different rhetorical elements are all things that I want you to start looking at, mindfully looking at in the next couple of readings that we do. And the response questions, or the reading questions, I'm already pushing you towards this, right? I might ask you in the questions, what's the tone of this story, or who's the audience for, the people who are communicating in this certain essay or story. So I'm kind of pushing you towards that already. But on your own, just be mindful of these, right? Your tone, your purpose, your audience, the writer's perspective, ethos, pathos, logos, and even start thinking about the other things that are in your key terms that your textbook has defined. You've been looking up those definitions, right? Doing those key terms. You'll have more key terms next week. I don't think there are any this week for you to define. So that's about it. There's some homework assignments for you to do on Moodle, so make sure that you read those, watch the videos that you're asked to watch, and that's it.